Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Wreck Roll. Alright, you may notice that this video went up on an odd day. Usually my videos go up on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and this is Wednesday. You may be asking what's going on. Well, I decided to post this video today instead of tomorrow, so there won't be a video tomorrow night. This is that video. I chose this day, however, because this is March 1st, 2023. It is the 3-year anniversary of my father's passing, and I wanted to put a video up just to kind of commemorate this day on the day itself. You may remember that on that day, 3 years ago, I went and attempted to do a video of an art exhibit at Baylor University, and just ended up, deciding not to do the video because of a bunch of weird things that were going on. And as I was driving home, I got a text message from my mom telling me that my dad was going downhill fast. And so I decided to come out here to Lake Waco and kind of just reflect on what was going on in my life. And like I said, I figured it kind of made sense to come back here and do this on the 3-year anniversary. So we're gonna just spend a little time out here enjoying the lake, and I may not say a lot, but I may also reflect on some of my memories of my father. Now this is sort of the scene that I had when I shot that video 3 years ago. And I'm not in exactly the same place. It's hard to figure out exactly where that was because the water level was different. The water level still hasn't really recovered from last summer, and it's still very, very low. I was figuring maybe it would rise up, but because it hasn't been that hot, so there wouldn't be that much evaporation, and hopefully the lake would be feeding it, or the river would be feeding it. But the truth is, there's still a drain on it because it's still the city's kind of main source of water, so we're pulling water from it still faster than it can replenish. But this is basically the scene. I think I was a little bit more over here when I shot this, but as I said a little earlier, I was over at Baylor University trying to shoot an art exhibit, and gave up on it. And as I was coming home, I got this text message from my mom. It came in at 4:38 on March 1st, 2022. Says, "Hi Breck, just letting you know that Dad will probably pass away today. Vitals are starting to go down, and his lungs are struggling to get the air they need. He is completely sedated and looks like he's sleeping. Brenda and I came this morning. He recognized us, and then they gave him meds to relax. His pastor is coming as soon as church is over, and we will let you know more. Please pray for all of us. Ask for prayers from your viewers too. We all need them. Sorry this is coming the night before your job starts, but we thought you would want to know. Love, Brenda and Mom." So yeah, that's the other part of this. You may recall that that my father passed literally 8 hours before I started my new job. And so unfortunately the start of my job, which I hit my 3-year anniversary tomorrow, will always be tied with me to the loss of my father. I'll tell you, that was kind of a difficult day that day, going into work and going through employee orientation and all that stuff, and knowing what had just happened the night before. I was looking at my call records, and I remember I'd just gone to bed because I had to get up and go to work the next morning when the phone rang, and it was my sister informing me that my father had passed away. And that call came in about 10:04 p.m. On the 1st. So yeah, that was a strange day, or day and a half. I am glad to know, though, that my father found out about my job before he passed. He was very happy. I'll admit that he was a little concerned when I decided to just pick up everything I have and move to Texas and start over. But You know, I think he had faith in me, and he thought my plan was at least viable. You know, basically sell the house in California, move to Texas, and start over. And you know, except for the fact that I'd hoped to have a job within like 3 months of getting here, and it took closer to what was it, about 10 months to get one. Other than that, the plan worked just perfectly. So like I said, I was proud and happy that my dad got to know about the job, and I do believe that he's kind of keeping an eye on me and is watching what's going on and probably pulling some strings up there to help move me along. I think he'd be very proud of how far I've come in a very short period of time, and you know, that gives me some comfort, because like I said, I knew he was a little concerned about this. My parents are both concerned about this. They were wondering whether I was making the right decision, and I guess I can't blame them. You know, it's leaving everything behind and starting over somewhere else. You know, that was a big move. You know, even some of my friends have mentioned that they thought it was really a brave thing to do, to just pick up and move like that. But my mom has often said, and I believe it too, that when I moved into my house, that if my father had still been alive, he probably would have come here, and he would have been a part of a lot of these early projects in the house, because he was always a part of the projects I would work on in my house in California. Basically every major thing that I ever did in that house, he was a part of it. You know, I used to have this elevated brick planter that ran the entire length of the side perimeter of the house, and he helped me build that and plant all the original plants in it. He helped me plant, you know, put the lawn in when we did that. He was there when we laid the concrete going to the backyard and built the patio cover. When I had to repaint the house because the HOA said it was time, he was a part of that. In fact, I've told you the story before where he took responsibility for painting a lot of the metal work on the house. You know, there was metal framework. There was like a grate in front of the window in front of the house, in front of the master bedroom, and we took that down. He painted it. There was a metal gate that went into the backyard. He painted that. You know, basically he'd agreed that he'd help me as much as possible, but he said it even at the time that his ladder climbing days were over. But I said, okay, well, but you can help me with these kinds of things. And you know, he painted, like I said, the front gate and the metal work and all that fun stuff. I've told you, I think, the story before. The metal gate had a piece of like sheet metal with little prefabricated holes cut in it that were like probably, you know, 1 millimeter in diameter, hundreds and thousands of these things. And when he painted it, the paint ended up plugging up all the holes. And so he spent maybe an hour painting it, and a week afterwards poking out each one of those holes with a nail to get the thing to look right again. So yeah, he was definitely dedicated and, you know, a perfectionist when it came to things like this. I also remember another time where I had a little problem in the house. I was attempting to install a couple of can lights upstairs. When they built the house, they put a whole bunch of, there was like a stairway going up, and then it turned around, there was a hallway that went back to a little loft, which I'd turned into an office. And in the little stairwell and hallway, there were 6 can lights there, so it was well lit. But when you got up into the loft area, there was only 1 can light up there, and so it didn't throw a whole bunch of light. So at one point, I decided to get up in the attic and install 2 new can lights. And when I was up there, I accidentally kneeled on the plumbing, the PVC pipe that fed the fire sprinklers, and I ended up crunching the pipe and flooding out the upstairs of the house. And it actually took me about 5 minutes to get the water off. So I had, water pouring from the roof into the upstairs of the house for 5 minutes. In fact, there was so much water up there that it actually seeped through the floor and was dripping through the ceiling downstairs in the living room. Once I finally got the water off, I ended up calling my father because, I was going to have to do something real quick to get that problem taken care of, or else I was going to have a mold and mildew issue. I remember calling him on the phone, and I think one of the things that always drew me to my father was he had kind of a wicked sense of humor. I think he played it really straight when I was a kid, but when I grew up and became an adult myself, he kind of let his sense of humor come out. And so I called him on the phone and I said, "What are you doing right now?" And he sarcastically responded, "Talking to you." And I said, "Yeah, I need you to come over here. I got a little problem." And he came over. We ended up having to rip the carpet out of the upstairs. And, he brought over a wet dry vac so that we could vacuum up as much of the water as possible. A little later, I think my mom showed up, and we ended up just hanging out for a while and going out to have dinner. See, that was something we did a whole bunch. Probably every week or two, I would either go to their house or they would come to my house. And if they came to my house, we'd either go out to dinner somewhere, or we would, I would do something on the barbecue. And so we did that night. I think I just cooked something on the barbecue that night. But, my dad and I were really, really close in his final years. And I guess I'll always be really grateful of that. I think I've told you this story too. When I finally got into my house and kind of got myself moved in and got everything kind of established, I had decided that there was a tradition that my grandfather, my dad's dad, started when my dad got his own house, and that is that my grandfather built my father a workbench, which remained in his garage for the entire time they lived there. Unfortunately, they ended up leaving it there, and I don't know if it's even still in the house anymore, but that was built by my grandfather. And when I finally got my house together, I decided that I wanted to continue that tradition. And I had a bunch of leftover lumber from some of the projects I'd worked on around the house, and I asked my father if he would build me a workbench. And he did, and it was built for a specific corner in my garage. And in fact, when I moved to Texas, I disassembled it and brought it with me, and it's now in my garage here in Texas too. You may recall that shortly after he passed, I got a little plaque that made up and engraved, and I attached that to that workbench and dedicated it to my father, who, after he passed away, I started referring to as the supervisor. You see, he'd always, whenever there was a project that I needed to work on, I always, it was kind of the inside joke that I need a supervisor. I need someone to come over and help me do the project. And I think I mentioned at the time even that, he wasn't a supervisor in that he would just sit there and supervise. He was actually in there helping with the work. And a lot of the things that I did in the house, he was a part of that. So that was always a very special thing to me, to have him be such a part of me getting my house going. And like I said before, I really wish he could have been here to help me with my current house, because he would have loved this. I also remember the time where I got to the point where I was looking to buy a house, buy my house in California. When I had finally moved out, I got an apartment initially, and it turned out that behind the apartment there was just a hill that had a bunch of oil derricks on it. Well, when they finally tapped out those wells, they sold the property to a developer who began building houses on it. And I could watch those houses being built from the balcony of my apartment. And at one point I went up there and just decided I wanted to look around and see what they had up there. They had the models open already. So I went in, looked at the models, and kind of picked out one that I thought was right for me, and contacted my mom and dad and said, I'm thinking I want to buy a house. I was still working at DMI and making, 12 or 13 bucks an hour, so I wasn't even really sure how I was going to be able to do that at the time. It turns out shortly after I made the agreement to buy the house that I got the job at Warner Brothers, and that boosted the salary up a lot. And when we got to the point we were ready to do the paperwork, my father said he would co-sign on the loan for me if needed, but turns out I was, with the salary I was getting over at Warner Brothers, I was able to, qualify for the loan on my own. But, that was another thing that, he was always supportive of things like that. If it was something I wanted to do and I was, I wanted it enough, he would try and find some way to make it happen and help me in any way he could. And, there was never any skepticism or any of that when it was getting the house. It's like, this is the one you want? Okay, yeah, I like this one. This is a nice house. And we looked at all the models, and on the day that I brought them up there, we made the decision that I was going to get the house. And they had like a map of the property in the realtor office, or in the sales office, not the realtor office, showing the different plots in the area where they were going to be building the houses. And they were building it in phases, and one of the phases was had just been completed, and we found the model I was looking for in that phase and walked into it. And it seemed like a nice house, but I was a little concerned it was too close to the main street. I didn't want the street noise. I wanted to be a little closer to the middle. And so we went back and looked at the map, and there was a phase next to it that had just started. They'd laid the foundations and nothing else. And by looking at the map, it became clear to me that they had allocated different sized backyards. And so I found the model I wanted, and I looked for the one basically had the biggest backyard because I wanted to have a nice sized backyard. And that was the one I picked, and that was the one I got. And that was really fun because since I lived so close to it in the apartment down the hill, I actually would come up after work every night and photograph the progress that happened during the day, because every day they were working on it, and I watched them frame it and wire the electrical and put the plumbing in it, put the drywall on, put the flooring in, install the kitchen, install the bathrooms. I watched the whole process go through, and that all started with my father supporting my decision to get a house. That always was sort of the American dream, to be a homeowner. And I'm lucky I've been able to do that twice now. I remember the time my dad and I installed the sprinkler system in my backyard. You got to remember, when they built the house, basically I just got a dirt patch in the backyard. There was nothing there. And it seems to me that when they leveled off the soil in there, they got the cheapest most clay-filled dirt they could to fill in the backyard. And it was a couple years between when I bought the house and when we actually installed the sprinkler system. And in that time, the couple years that had been in there, the clay had basically dried up and turned into almost rock. And so when we were installing the sprinkler system back there, we had to literally chip through all this clay that was hard as a rock. And I went out and bought like a 6-foot long, 1-inch thick, what we call a digger bar. And because I knew I was going to need that to chip through the clay under this under the yard. And my dad went and got one too, and we spent probably 2 days tunneling through all this to make the trenches to put the irrigation system in. I honestly think part of the reason I never was that successful with the yard is that it just was such a low quality of soil underneath everything. When we put the lawn in, we put a couple inches of high quality topsoil on there, but it never really did that well because of what was underneath it. And like I said, I remember having to chip through that. It was a hot day hot couple of days in the summer, and we both worked our tails off getting that thing installed. Now, I made the decision to move to Texas about almost a year before I moved. It was the previous summer that I made the decision. I'd had a really bad day at work and decided at that point, that's it, I'm done, I'm out of here. And ended up calling my parents. They were visiting family in Minnesota at the time, and told them what my plans were, and that I was gonna fix the house up and sell it and go to Texas. And from that point on, I had a lot of work to do on the house because I had some kind of really crazy paint schemes in the house, and I knew that I couldn't just leave those there because that was going to turn people off. They're going to look at this as like, what the heck are you doing in here? So I made this decision that I was going to repaint the entire inside of the house, and of course my father was a big part of that. Helping me get going. When we finally got to about December, November and December, Disneyland, I was still working at Disney at the time, was getting ready to do their Christmas stuff. And sometimes my department would loan people to the maintenance department at certain times to help them put like Christmas lights up and stuff like that. So from that point on, during that season, I was all of a sudden working at night. And so I'd get home at 5 or 6 in the morning and I had to go to bed. But my dad would come over still, and I would just have a list of things that I needed to get done, and he would tackle that list, and I'd get up, maybe, noon or 1 or something like that. And he would have just finished a whole bunch of these projects for me. So, he was once again very instrumental in helping me get the house ready to go and all that fun stuff. So anyway, I think that kind of concludes my video for today. Just wanted to kind of share some memories of my father, because he was such an influential part of my life, and I still miss him every day, and still wish that he could be here to help me with some of the projects that I work on. I know that, part of what I've been able to do with my new house, it came from what I learned from him, and just from his genes, because he was always really good with his hands and always doing a lot of things on his own, all of his own little projects. And I learned all of that from working with him. And so, like I said, he's been a huge part of helping me get to where I am here, and I know I'll miss him forever. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you next time. Good night.